Good morning, good afternoon, and good night, and welcome to the pod where we chat, argue, and wax poetic about the movies that we love to talk about. Every movie has something to say, and we love trying to analyzing what they capture. Welcome to the Shatter After. I'm Brandon Alvarado, joined by co-creator and host Mike Thomas, and we are excited to talk about this amazing, explosive, compact collection of art that is Christopher Nolan's Oppenheimer. He wrote it for the screen and directed it in premium IMAX amazing film based on the amazing biography American Prometheus. Oppenheimer is an amazing 3-hour epic that is anything but boring and is amazingly engaging, impactful, energetic, chaotic, and one of the best films in years. Award season, whoever cares about those, but award season has proven that we are not the only ones that have enjoyed and have been amazed by what Christopher Nolan has crafted with his team, crew, and cast of actors in this film known as Oppenheimer. And Cillian Murphy delivers a phenomenal performance as the titular J. Robert Oppenheimer in this amazing film that I have seen now 3 times, and I can't wait to watch again because of how enthralling the narrative is, the performances are, the music is perfect for the type of film that it is. This film is nothing but a triumph, and I'm going to stop talking because I got to let Mike talk because that's why this is a podcast. It's supposed to be a conversation. But yes, we are talking about Oppenheimer. Mike,
Yeah.
are you excited?
I'm very excited. This is personally my favorite movie of 2023. That was a great year of films.
Yes.
This includes a lot of my favorite performances as well. Like you said, this is a 3-hour epic, right? And usually when I think of 3-hour epics, I'm thinking of Ben Hur. I'm thinking of The Lord of the Rings. I'm thinking of The Batman, Avengers Endgame, right? Like
There's a fight
not
somewhere, there's swords.
there's swords, there's fantasy, there's dragons,
Yes.
and this is mainly people in a room talking.
Yes. Yes.
And I will say there have been other movies that have come out in 2023 that had all the spectacle and all the things that were significantly shorter than this that just couldn't keep my attention. But I was glued to that IMAX screen. And then when I watched it at home, I was glued to this screen right over here, this television set. And I'm just like, oh man, Christopher Nolan, you did it, dude. You
Yes.
made a drama feel like a spectacle. And I didn't
Yes.
think that was something that we could actually achieve.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's the biggest surprise for me is that it was a spectacle film
Yeah.
because it had all the elements of tension, action, reaction, um, and the precision that creating a spectacle requires, right? Like when you have an amazing action movie or an action fight scene, something as simple as a fight scene, it's all about
Right.
precision. It's all about precision in the editing, in the presentation, in each punch, in each dodge, each block. Like not just the performances, the safety things, but also how the viewer absorbs all that information through his eyes, right? Like
Right.
all those things are here, and like you said, it's all conversations, and but they're all interesting because I think it's not just the performances, but the source material is presented in a way that it's otherworldly enough for you to be intrigued,
Yeah.
but it's severely and excessively grounded because we're talking about an actual person and things that actually happened almost to the T of how it happened based on memories captured and written down on the
Right.
blog on the bio book that was used as a basis for this movie. Um, which is funny because as someone that likes based on true event movies, right?
Mm,
A lot of the based on true events, right? Which is not what this is because it's not named that. It's not really what this is, even though we know it's based on true events. Um, those use a lot of movies use the based on true events um, slogan
hmm.
as a eye catcher more than anything. Like they
Yeah.
want you to be interested in this because this is based on something that happened. It's almost like gossip, right?
It's
Like
based it, but there's also times where it's like it can be based on something and then it's not like a one-to-one depiction. Like
right,
Hamilton, right, is based on true events, but none of that actually really happened that way
right.
that that musical presents it, right? So
Yes,
you always have to
Aaron
be a
Burr
little
wasn't
weary
in
of
the
that.
room that it happens, even though he really wanted to be in the room.
Click, boom.
There you go. But yeah, it's. I love how it doesn't use any of the tropes that a lot of other creators or filmmakers would use to draw
Yeah.
attention, to draw eyeballs to this story. It is just and simply and precisely a good film.
Yeah.
You're glued to your seat because you're looking at art. You're looking at something that you cannot deny was so perfectly crafted, so perfectly performed. And it's funny because in every conversation that you hear or interview from the actors, and the speeches that were given out, were the awards that have been won, everybody talks about how everybody was in their A game. Like
Yeah.
all the pros came to play, and all the pros delivered on what was expected of them because they all wanted to make something brilliant, and that's what they did.
This is Robert Downey Jr.'s best performance, period, in my opinion. This is Cillian Murphy's easily best performance. And
Yep.
Matt Damon is amazing in this movie.
Yes. 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 Yes.
So
Emily
yeah, like
Blunt.
she's fantastic, man.
Yes. Yes. Yep. Yep.
It's you know, watching this movie, if you look at what IMDb says and Rotten Tomatoes, it's like the genre is listed. It's not listed biopic. It's listed thriller. I think that's very interesting because when you hear the term thriller, you think John Wick, you think The
Right.
Equalizer, you think Jesus Christ, it's Jason Bourne, right? But for Oppenheimer to
Yes.
be a
It's Oppie.
thriller,
No.
it's obvious. I am become death. No, but the fact that that drama is thrilling, and I like
Yeah.
you were talking about how the structure of this movie works. I want to kind of get into the nitty gritty of it, of like how Nolan once again uses time to his advantage, and like the
Yeah.
flashbacks and flash forwards and that back and forth keeps you interested and keeps you on your toes so you
Yep.
don't get bored, so those conversations don't get stale, because you see Lewis Strauss talking in one scene, then we
It's
cut
pronounced straws.
straws, excuse me, you're correct. You see RDJ talking in one scene, right? And then we
Yep.
cut back to that initial conversation. And for 3 hours, they had me on my seat wondering what the world this man said to Albert Einstein. And
Now,
it's like, man.
yep. The idea that the movie starts and the movie ends with that scene. It's also I also love the simplicity of it, right?
Yeah,
How even though the movie moves all around, it really hasn't left that moment. Like
no.
you're like you kind of start thinking you never left that moment to a degree. And that's one of the magics of cinema and knowing how to edit things that way. Um, now, using time is one thing that you're right. Like it's a movie that bounces around from different periods of time, but with the same characters, right?
Yeah,
As opposed to introducing new characters all the time. But it does that, but then but also one of the things that it uses to justify its length which I find fascinating, is that Oppenheimer is actually two movies going on at the same time.
Essentially, yeah.
You have Fission, which is the first movie, which is everything through Oppenheimer's perspective. Is that first person account vision of events through Oppenheimer, which is everything that we see in color. And
Mhm.
the director aptly shows you that the color is under the movie number one, which is Fission, Fission, yes. And then when you go to the black and white film, which is titled number two, Fusion, that's everything from Louis Strauss' perspective. And you have these two concurrent films that are telling the same story from different perspectives. That what a great way to not only keep you engaged, to surprise you, but
Yeah.
also show you how powerful conversations are. Because it's never just the one thing. It's never just the topic of conversation.
Yeah,
It's
it's two sides of the
who
story.
exactly. It's who were in the middle, who were authoring that conversation, and why do these two perspectives matter, and how different they can be.
For sure. I think that again just speaks to Nolan as a director, right? Because if somebody said, "I'm going to make a film based on the life of J. Robert Oppenheimer," it can just be a pretty by the numbers biopic. I mean, we've gotten plenty of by the numbers biopics over the last few years, whether that be about Elvis or Whitney Houston,
Yep.
or we had Rocket Man. And those are good films, but
Yep.
like you said, the ability, and again, Nolan's stamp is always time. Tenet, Interstellar, Batman Begins. He's been doing that, right? So
Yep.
for him to put that Nolan essence on that film and stay true to who he is as a director and put his spin on it, I think speaks to his ability as a director to make that work. Because look at this cast and look at like the 45 main characters of this story, and not only is he able to juggle all that and juggle where they are mentally, where they are physically in specific eras. Also, shout out to the makeup department for
Oh yeah.
aging them up and aging them down based on where we are, but also cinematography wise, right? Of like the color and then the black and white, and seeing the shift between those two, seeing the same shot in color and then seeing it again in black and white from a different perspective makes it feel completely different. And that again falls right on Nolan as a one writer for writing the script out the way he did, and two as the director for making that effective and come to life in the way that he did.
And making sure that to not skimp out on what it would require to make those things happen the way he wanted them to happen. And because it's not just the color, right? Or the
Yeah.
two different films, Fission and Fusion. Did you notice that he consistently changes from widescreen to full screen depending on what the shot requires? Which
Yeah.
it's also a very deliberate choice, which is
It's
not
one of
the
those
most
things I
common
think work.
choice.
Yeah, I think it works best in IMAX. Like that's why he kept saying, "See this movie in IMAX. See this in 70 millimeter." It's not just him being pretentious of like, "You need
Yeah,
to see my movie on the biggest screen possible." It's very much in the James Cameron way of like, "Hey, this movie was made to be seen like this. It would be a disservice to watch this on your phone." And that's not a
yeah,
disrespect to people who
yeah.
watch movies on their phone, but like for that zoom
It'll
in,
do a
zoom
disservice
out,
to you as the viewer. You're not
right?
allowing yourself to really grasp everything that was done to make this the best film. And it's funny because I have a 4K TV, and I noticed the shifts. I didn't
Mhm.
notice them in theaters. I noticed them when I watched it at home. And I was like, wait, it's changing between this. And I was like, it's on purpose. And I
Right.
remembered, for those that have had the privilege of finding an actual physical copy, like I was, because It's sold out, Mike. The 4K Blu-ray of Oppenheimer sold out. When was the last time that you heard that a 4K of anything sold out?
I don't think I've
Like,
ever heard that. Maybe the Avengers, like
yeah,
maybe.
maybe.
Um,
But so I saw it and I watched the special features. And this is not only is this film amazing, and I think we can talk about technical stuff now, and then we can move on to talk about performances per se, because I think that's going to be the bulk of the conversation, right?
yeah,
But he knew what he wanted to do. He knew that he didn't want to sacrifice the quality of the vision that he had. So he made choices, and technology was developed and created to make this film possible, which to
isn't the
me is
film for this like miles long? Apparently,
not only that, there's no such thing as black and white IMAX unless this film is made. Like IMAX literally developed black and white IMAX film to be able to film those black and white shots. That is
that's why they
not
look
a
so good too, though. It's
yes, they look so crisp and detailed. What when we see black and white in this film, it's not a filter. No, it was filmed on black and white IMAX film that was developed for this film, which is crazy. That's the power of Nolan. Like he calls IMAX and says, "Hey guys, I need black max. Can you guys make it?" And they tried it and they did it and it looks great, and you can tell the difference. You can
yeah,
because everything looks detailed and crisp, but also not only did they develop this film, this is the first movie that ever does one shots of characters on IMAX. Like IMAX, of course, was designed for wider shots, bigger shots, right? Detail shots. But not a
hmm
lot of people have actually used IMAX cameras to do zoom ins. That's why you see these changes in format, because they're doing zoom ins for these characters. A lot of them are because of the type of shot that they're doing, and they're getting closer as opposed to just enjoying the wider shots. Um, all the effects also, like a lot of people underestimate the brilliance of the practical effects team
yeah,
of this movie. All those explosions, all those are all practical effects. Very minimal CGI stuff, but it's practical effects.
yeah.
Like
It's art, and I'm not to
yes,
be cliche of like this is cinema, but like there was a real artistry that went into this, from the
yep,
writing, from the direction, from the
yep,
technical aspect of making IMAX cameras, right, to filming all of that practically. It like the explosions in this movie feel real because they
yes.
recreated them in a way to where you get that scale, in the sense that, again, not trying to belittle action movies, but like you see superhero movies and like random Quinjet blows up, you don't really feel like anything really happened. It's just
There's no
cannon
Quinjet.
fodder, right? Right. But for this movie to have these tests feel so real, especially when you watched it in IMAX for like that first time, you hear it in that audio and that sound mixing. And that's something we've all probably criticized Nolan a lot about, his sound mixing. You can't hear Batman Begins to save your life, but Oppenheimer takes advantage of all of that. This is
Yep,
honestly by far, on a technical level, his best movie, without a
yep,
doubt.
yep. I actually watched. I the times that I've rewatched it, I watched it on my PS5 using the 3D audio headsets.
Ooh.
Ooh, and it's just chef's kiss. So good,
I've
so
never even
great.
thought about trying that before, using 3D
No,
audio.
I highly recommend it. It's really great.
Nice.
Now you talk about Nolan and the sound editing, and yes, it's a lot of times this. I feel he learns his lesson over the years,
Hmm.
and it's been a lot better. And then this is definitely his best. Um, the sound editing in this film is great. It's
Yeah.
just so good. It's exceptional. Um, and I just can't. I keep going back to how much care is used to make this film, and you can tell that in all its aspects. Um,
I'm so glad that. Universal gave him the space to do that too, because like I know he's Christopher Nolan, and that
Yeah,
by itself has a little bit of weight to it, right?
yeah,
But the fact that this 3-hour drama is able to get the budget it needs, and that the faith that Universal put in Nolan is like, hey, yeah, you could do whatever you want. It's not a superhero movie. It's not a Godzilla movie. It's not a
yeah.
John Wick movie. But they're like, hey, we believe in you and your vision for this story so much that we are going to give you everything you need to succeed. And I'm so happy this paid off for them, like becoming one of the biggest movies of the year.
One of the effects that I think the level of artistry that this movie has, and it's a proven fact now.
Mm.
I equate it to the Tom Cruise effect. When this
Okay.
guy does all his stunts, we're afraid for this guy. like, but
Yeah.
we are that much more engaged. That's one of the reasons why great movies like the old Jackie Chan movies and like John Wick, right? Because a lot of them, John Wick not as much, but like they do their stuff. They do, and when you know that people are doing the things, and we know that it's not a computer doing the things, right? We know
Yeah.
it's not AI or like a CGI model. Like there is this real person
Your
doing these
disbelief can
things,
only go so far. But
right? And that's one of those things that I kind of equate it to that, and it made me think about that when you were talking about
yeah.
the reality, the explosions, the sounds, and everything like that. Now, one of the things that I've grown to appreciate from Nolan as a director, more so with this film, and I never paid attention to it, and now I go back to his previous films and how he designs story and how he does editing. There's something about his creative direction that he loves and goes above and beyond in his attempt to be precise. He's a very precise and succinct director.
Oh yeah,
he
for sure.
he does, and you can, and now after watching this film, which again is 3 hours long, so it's not a short film,
No.
but everything that we saw, we didn't waste an ounce of time at all our time was none of our time was taken for granted, and he didn't waste any time. Everything that happened, every second, everything was moving towards something. Every action, every word, every dialogue was coming from somewhere and going somewhere. Like
Yeah.
it was such a tight film. And I
Uh,
go back to his previous films, and all of his films, in a way, shape, or form, feel like this. They're like this tight unit that, not every director's like that, but I kind of feel like that's one of his trademarks, kind of like one of his signature things.
so me and Cliff are always talking about Quentin Tarantino, right?
Yes.
And one of the things, I don't remember which interview it was. He does a lot of them, but in one of his interviews, he's like, "I have to be in control of my own projects
Yeah.
because he can follow his vision. He can't take somebody else's script. He can't take someone else's music
Yeah.
and fit it to his own style, right?"
Yeah.
Nolan is a very similar way where while he doesn't solo write all of his scripts, he is still very much heavily involved with them.
Yes. Yes,
And
he
so
is.
that I think allows it to feel that way of like it's Nolan's vision. He knows how the scene is supposed to go.
Yes.
He knows how it's supposed to feel, the emotion it's supposed to convey because he was in the room helping write it or he wrote it himself entirely. And
Yeah.
so I think it's why Tarantino's films feel that way. It's why Nolan's also feel that way. Because when you have that singular vision or a unified vision with him and his writing team, it allows the movie to feel complete, feel like one vision. It doesn't feel like it was hacked to bits by a studio
Right.
or had a bunch of rewrites. One thing Nolan did say in like an interview of like, there's no deleted scenes because he got everything he needed. So
Which again, it's one of those things like, yes, yes.
it blows my mind because there's 3 hours of bonus features on this Blu-ray apparently, but none of them are deleted scenes.
which is phenomenal because when I watched the deleted scenes, I got a chance. I sat one day and just watched them all. It's all fascinating stuff. It's for people like us that want more
Yeah,
because of the artistry. You know what I mean? And I feel that it's been a long time since we've seen special features that matter. like
yeah.
like
They're not
getting
just
this,
fluff.
yeah, getting this this physical media, which I'm not a big, not that I'm against physical media. I love it, but I don't have a lot of space. So whatever I buy, I'm very careful because I know it's going to take space. So I want it to
Mhm.
matter.
Right.
So like it made me, this particular purchase has made me go like, I kind of want to buy more now, but I want it to be this good. I want it to be this informative. I want it to be this interesting. Um,
Yeah. We've
so it's funny
spent
because he thinks about the consumer in all aspects, kind of, which is fascinating too.
I love that. And this movie's on. We didn't say, but it's streaming on Peacock now. So if you didn't get a chance to buy
Yeah,
it, you can stream it.
yeah.
We've spent almost a half hour of this program talking about this movie without actually talking about the plot of this movie. So
Yes,
I kind of want to dive into
let's do
the
that.
the story. Like that's again, it's a 3 hour monster. We can approach it from any angle, but I do want to get
Correct.
into Cillian Murphy's performance as Oppenheimer and
Wow.
the yeah, he's fantastic, but like also how we structure this story in the sense that we're at this hearing, right? And so we're seeing it from different people's perspectives. Robert Downey's, for example, being one of the other main ones. You already broke down how it's two films spliced together, essentially. But the character of Oppenheimer, I really appreciate the raw, vulnerable emotion that Murphy brings to this performance in the sense that
Yes.
he's not perfect. He's very flawed, and they lean into that. When you get movies like this, we mentioned Hamilton earlier, right? As much as I love that musical, um, Lin Manuel Miranda does glorify bad people and shies away from the bad things that they've done. And Oppenheimer doesn't do that. Like
Right.
all of his flaws are fully there from the jump. Like when we're introduced to this guy, he basically tried to assassinate his teacher. And it's like
Yeah.
Nolan doesn't shy away from the flaws of this character or try to
Yeah.
glorify him like he was a war hero. Like he doesn't do any of that. He very much just like, hey, this was his life. This was a very flawed man. This is what happened.
Yeah.
And I think Murphy's performance elevates that even more. And his performance with Florence Pugh, with Emily Blunt, and like seeing these different sides of him, I think are very fascinating.
I I I agree with you 100%. And one of the things about his performance that I enjoyed is how nuanced it is, and very detailed.
Yeah.
Because one of the things about Oppenheimer that, I started reading the book, and one of the things that they talk about is, um, troubled times when he first went to Europe. You get a little bit of that, but also the whole mixture of being an intellectual and knowing you're intellectual and knowing how smart you are, and
Yeah.
how that drives him to be kind of cocky,
Yeah.
and drives him to be confident because he knows who he is, and he knows how people see him. And you can tell in the performance that he doesn't necessarily lose sight of how flawed he can be, because he's very, 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 he plays Oppenheimer in a way where he recognize Oppenheimer recognizes that he's not perfect, and he
Mhm.
recognizes that he's made mistakes and will make mistakes, but he is very proud, very prideful, and when people celebrate him, he likes it,
Yeah.
which is actually accentuated and explored in detail in how it backfires when after the detonation of the gadget, you have the scene with the pounding on the bleachers. Um,
Hmm. Terrifying.
yes, because he is saying everything that he knows will get the applause, but all the guilt of what he just has unleashed on the world is sinking in at the same time.
Yeah.
So he becomes a facade of he starts to experience the worst side of what he enjoys.
Yeah.
And
It
that is very frightening and very fascinating and very it has to be very difficult to perform, because not only is he saying these things in like, you have like his you
putting
have
on the
this you
face.
yes, and you have this euphoria of excitement, but you can see in his eyes how he's dreading every word he's saying.
Yeah. Like that's again why it's such a fantastic layered performance. I think again, like that's why I keep saying how flawed this character is, and it really speaks to the um how do I phrase this? It really speaks to just science as a whole in the sense that like you have the ability to create
Yes.
and discover these new inventive ideas, right? Like but it can always go south and it can always be used for the wrong thing. And like being the guy to say, "Hey, we can make this into a bomb." Because in the moment it's like you're working with the military. Of course that's something you would do.
Yep.
But then having that sink in of like, "Oh my gosh, what is this actually going to do? What is this going to unleash? What have I done?" type of revelation. It kind of goes back to the old Jurassic Park thing of like you're so preoccupied on if you could, you lost sight of if you should, right? And like I
Yep.
think seeing that one become a real like this is still based on a true story, and it's like that happens so much,
Yeah.
and at this point, this happened on its grandest scale
Yep.
with making this gadget as we're calling it
Yep.
today.
Yep.
um,
That
so I think
I
seeing
like.
that,
I find fascinating the idea of the gadget, because he doesn't want to talk about the science. He doesn't want to talk about it
yeah,
and use the dark euphemism of it, which is what
right,
essentially is a mass killing bomb. He doesn't want to say that because he's going to have to be talking about it consistently. So he calls it
yeah,
as a gadget, which is just a tool. It's a thing. It's something that I'm not going to talk to. I'm not going to talk about it in a sense of its darkest feature. I'm just going to talk about it in a way that we can just easily talk about it and not have to think about all that.
yeah. I think that's such a fascinating angle, and then seeing how he responds to Matt Damon, right? General Leslie, I think was his name.
Leslie Groves, yes.
Gross. Yeah. Seeing him bounce off each other and like have him having to work with this weird, quirky, too smart for his own good scientist, and like
Yep.
seeing that back and forth between the two, them having to
Yep.
recruit other people to work on this project and
What a
being
fun ride. That's the
right,
best train ride in movies.
being fearful of telling them what they're actually doing here at first
Yep.
because nobody's gonna agree to make a mass murdering bomb. It's seeing that tension between them is fascinating. Seeing Emily Blunt's character and how she fits into this as well, Catherine Oppenheimer, I think is very fascinating, and their relationship because again, this genius is quirky at best, and seeing how those two work things out or how they don't work things out.
Yep.
One of the most interesting scenes in this film is we're actually from Catherine's perspective, and we see the ghost of Jean on Robert, and it's like I saw this on like X. We're not calling it Twitter anymore. I saw this on X,
Yeah.
and people are saying like that's the most useless sex scene in all of cinema. I'm like, I hard disagree. I feel like that
It
was
is if you're understanding the turmoil
right.
well, it's the funny thing is, think about this.
Yeah,
From at that point of the movie where that scene occurs, it's pointless. But when you find out, actually, wait, no, that happens when they're talking about her. Well, no, I think they're talking about the first meeting. Yes, that occurs when they meet in the flashback for the first time.
Mm.
So at this point, we don't know that she was still she was a a source of conflict between these two characters.
Yeah.
So if you watch the movie till that point, you can make the argument that it's a useless scene. But when you watch the movie, no,
Yeah.
it's 100% not that. This woman is haunted by the woman that was always important in her husband's life, even while they were together.
Mhm.
You know, it's
And
it's
it's affecting Catherine's psyche, which is the entire
correct,
point of like, this is what
correct,
she is seeing, and this
right,
is what is haunting her in this moment. Because again,
right.
this is
She
decades
can't
later.
see this. Right,
Right.
right.
That's why I think again, Nolan's movies, there's like think pieces on like how sexless they are and how unromantic they are. So
Yes, yes,
for him to actually commit and do something like that and it have a very important purpose to a character in
it's
that moment,
precise.
precise,
Yeah,
exactly.
yeah,
And you know, I've gotten flack on social media for saying a lot of sex scenes in movies are pointless. They're just kind of there. You watch an HBO
yes,
show, they just kind of happen. But
yes,
like if you're gonna do it, I'd rather it be something that affects a character in some form
yeah,
or fashion, like they
yeah,
did here.
yeah.
Uh, and I guess that's a good time to talk about Florence Pugh in this movie. She's not here that long, but she gives a fantastic performance. And again, shows us another side of Robert in the sense that this is a character who doesn't quite know what he wants or what she wants, and again shows that he doesn't have all the answers, I
Right.
guess. And then seeing him try and mature and get with Catherine, and then
Yep.
see that hit its hardships.
Yep.
I appreciate that we get a look at his personal life because it's very much could have just been this is what they did making the bomb, but instead we open up the character fully and see his home life and his work
Yes.
life and what
Yeah.
led to this courtroom.
Yeah. And that's where it gets powerful, right? That's where it
Yeah.
gets meaningful. The movie's not about the bomb. It's not about the gadget. It's about the man that led the project. But because it's about the man that led the project, we're looking at the man from all angles. And one of the things that I find fascinating about Oppenheimer also is how Killian was able to bring to life the care for the role of scientist that Oppenheimer projected to the world. Like he understood that he had a duty to the world as a scientist. And that leads to one of the most powerful, I think it's one of the most powerful lines in the film is that on one end in the beginning of the project when he's talking to Ravi and trying to convince Isak to Ravi, which by the way, after watching the Santa Claus again during Christmas, watching Bernard, um, and then watching him here, I think it's great. I love the whole thing that he's always trying to have Oppenheimer eat. I love that being like a running gag.
Yeah.
Um, that again, humor in a Nolan movie, right? Um, eat
Nolan
before
has a
we.
sense of humor. It's just very understated. I think people miss it sometimes.
Yes, yes. Like many things, right? I like the idea of when it comes to the gadget, we have to build it before. In terms of Oppenheimer, the scientist, not just a politician or whatever. How they explore all different roles that Oppie has to assume. We have to build the gadget before the Germans do.
Mm-hmm.
But now Hitler dies because he kills him. Right? Hitler dies.
Spoilers, I guess.
Yeah, right. And a group of people in Los Alamos is questioning what's the purpose of the gadget now. And then Oppenheimer says this line. I think it's in this moment a little further on, but it comes from this concern. is that the world will not understand what we're building here and the threat of what we're building here until we use it. And that is it's horrible
Yeah, it's terrifying.
because that's what happened, but it makes me think, was he right? Could we have really comprehended what an atomic bomb and the effect of it unless we had used it?
No, I don't think so, for
You know
being
what I
completely
mean?
honest.
And that's the crazy guilt. Is the whole Solomon thing. Like, when you have too much wisdom and knowledge, it becomes a burden, right? And
Yeah.
which I find it very fascinating, because we see him as him being hungry for this wisdom and sharing it and exploring and knowing, and then he helps build this thing, and it becomes the biggest discovery in the world, but then the worst, but it's also the worst discovery in the world. It changes the world entirely. And now all he's trying to do is bring to attention why we don't need it, which is one of the biggest things that causes backlash in his life after Los Alamos, because he's
Yeah.
trying to rein it all back in. But it's because he's trying to do what I believe is his job, which it's why it's such a layer performance, why it's so paradoxical and contradictory as well.
Yeah.
But I think it's one of the most it's one of those this is one of those films that it's complete, because you walk away with a complete picture of a man that you probably have never bothered thinking about ever in your life.
No, for sure.
None of us cared who the hell Oppenheimer was, but Nolan said Oppenheimer is important. Okay, let's watch it. And we all have a very clear picture. And for it to not be a biopic, for it to be a window into a period of this man's life that really explore who this man was, and to you walk away with that sense of it, but also coming out of it having watched one of the biggest films in the world. You know what I mean? It's a balancing act. It's just fascinating, because you ask yourself all those questions. So I do like the whole thing about art making you think, and this movie being considered that and being recognized as that. But Cillian Murphy is amazing as Oppenheimer. You've mentioned Matt Damon a couple of times too. He was hilarious as Groves.
Yeah.
My
I know,
favorite line.
before we move off of Damon right quick, I know he did say that, like, he was stepping away from acting, and like he told his wife, "I'm gonna
Yes,
stop unless Christopher Nolan calls me," and then immediately Christopher Nolan
Robert
called
Downey
him,
Jr. did the same thing.
and I think that's so funny. Like, I hope their marriages are okay. No
Yes,
joke, but
of
like
course, of course, of
the
course.
fact that you told your wife you were going to retire and then immediately had to backtrack because of Nolan is hilarious to me. But
But the fact that
it was
their
a great.
wives understand, I mean, if Nolan called you, I mean, you pick up the
You can't
phone.
say no. It's Christopher Nolan.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, supposedly he's coming back for another Bourne movie, but I don't know.
Yeah, allegedly. We'll see. But yeah, you're
Allegedly,
saying one of your favorite
one of my
performances.
favorite lines is when they're doing the scouting, right, for all these
Hmm.
scientists, and they're on the train, and Oppie goes, "How much can they tell them?" And he goes, and he's eating. You can tell them anything you want until you feel my boot in your balls.
Classic.
The delivery of this man, it's just perfect. It's great. And I love the fact that it's Matt Damon plays this military guy that you can tell that the vision of this man is that he's strict, he does what his country needs him to be, but he understands that everybody is just people. He's not driven by the politics of it all, until not being aware of the politics of it all affects his duty. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, in this time where communism is a problem, you got to figure everyone in the militia, in the military, right? They have to understand that everything is political, because if they say the wrong thing, if they talk to the wrong person, it's trouble, and you're going to be forced to make decisions, or people are going to make decisions for you.
Right.
But I like how you have the window into this man that is successfully able to balance all these things, and without sacrificing his integrity as a person and as a military man. So I like the complexity, even though I'm gonna be honest, he's the butt of all the jokes. He's just funny, but you can see how layered his performance was as well, because he
Mm-hmm.
really cared about the people that he had under his care. I mean, of course, after the gadget is successful, you can kind of tell that he's cutting everyone off because nobody else matters anymore. You know what I mean?
Right.
But you can tell that it wasn't a personal thing; it was a duty thing. The chapter of Los Alamos is closed. He's moving away to something else. But he understood what needed to happen, and he understood that he needed to be flexible. To make things happen. He knew how to work with creatives. Um, but yeah, Matt Damon was great as
Matt
Rose.
Damon was great. Another underrated performance was Alden Ehrenreich. He's
Yo,
fantastic.
yes, yo, like I'm gonna be honest, bro. I'm so sad that that kid got the rap that he got after Solo, but he's all right. He's great in this movie.
He was
He
also a great
is.
Han Solo, but that's another conversation.
Hey man, I haven't seen the movie. I'm not a Star Wars guy, but I believe you. I trust your judgment. I mean, we're doing this together for a reason. Um, but no, Eldenreich in this film is great. And to be and think about this, his job for 90% of his screen time is to bounce off Robert Downey Jr.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like the third guy, like I don't know who he is, but he was there so that it wasn't just the two of them in the room. You kind of feel like he wasn't really there to like
Right.
be a force of nature like these two were, especially as the animosity begins to boil over between Eldenreich's character and Downey's. But
Hmm.
the way he stood toe to toe with him, especially towards the end, I think it was great. It was so great. Um, Rami Malek, I don't think he did any. He was good. He's always great in everything he does, but he wasn't given a huge role necessarily.
Yeah, it's
Um,
definitely one of those of like, hey, Nolan called. You're going to show up for 5 minutes, and you know,
yes, but then Gary Oldman shows up for 5 minutes, and boy, oh boy, it's Gary Oldman.
oh yeah,
Yeah, bro. Like that was what a brutal, what a brutal scene, and how Gary Oldman delivers it, and again, I love how he just transforms into President Truman. Like that's one of the things I love about Gary Oldman. He's not afraid of makeup,
no, yeah,
and he's so great.
unrecognizable.
Yes, at all. It was great. Um, Emily Blunt. Um, I like this. I loved her performance. Part of me feels that it was also like against type. Like this is not the type of role that we usually see her in. Similar to Downey, right? We don't
Hmm.
usually see them like they both really went across against type, and I think she got a couple of noms, right? As Kitty,
I'm not sure.
she may have,
She may
but it
have, but
she may have, because if she did, I'm happy she did, because she did an amazing job as Kitty Oppenheimer.
before we wrap this up, one thing I do want to talk about is like the cultural impact of this movie, because what we do here on the chatter after we just did La La Land. That was one of our last movies, and that was like
Yeah.
what 7 years old.
Oh yeah.
We don't really get to talk about current day events that often
Yeah.
on this show. So like, what did you think of the whole Barbenheimer
It was
phenomenon.
amazing. It's amazing. It's beautiful and brilliant.
Yeah.
And it's it felt like, not that as an I'm not an as an avid movie gear that I used to be. Like I don't go to the movies as much as I want or would love to.
Mhm.
But I still have my AMC A list because whenever I want to go, I'll go. Right.
Right.
Um, because I'm still a firm believer that there's nothing like going to the movies. Um, it felt like we actually had a blockbuster summer season, and both of the films were not the blockbuster films that you were used to, but they were blockbusters because of how amazing the word of mouth was, how amazing the cultural impact was, how amazingly they stayed in the conversation.
Yeah.
Two polar opposite films driving the conversation of cinema. That hasn't happened in years.
It it restored my faith in cinema. And I
Yeah.
know that sounds
Yeah.
like a hyperbolic statement, but like
Well, you got to think
the
about it. All the conversation. I'm sorry, I don't want to interrupt you, but
you're
all the
good. Go ahead.
movies that we've had that have had some type of cultural impact. And what I mean by cultural impact, I'm not talking about it changed lives. I'm saying that it was something that fueled the zeitgeist of the time.
Yeah.
We're superhero movies. That's the only thing that's been driving cultural cinematic conversation in the last 10 years. That's why this was so different.
Yeah, and that's what I mean by it restored my faith, right? Because for the last decade, we were like, movies are dying. Movie theaters can't get people to come. The only thing that's playing are superhero movies, and you have somebody like a Martin Scorsese saying superhero movies aren't even real movies. They're carnivals and
Yeah.
blah blah blah. And it's just like, regardless of how you feel about superhero movies, I'm just glad a different genre got people
Yes.
interested.
Yes.
And
Yes.
that to me is like, there is a market for these. There is an audience for, like, Barbie made $1 billion. So for two of the biggest movies to be a drama, a thriller, a biopic, whatever you want to describe Oppenheimer, and then for Barbie to look like a cheesy popcorn flick, but then turn on you and become very deep and thought provoking about an existential crisis and what it means to be alive. And for that to not scare people away, people watch the movie and it does that and
Yep.
they're invested. And I love that these two movies happen. And I love that they were able to play off each other and that we have
Yep.
Cillian Murphy talking about Barbie and we have Margot Robbie talking about Oppenheimer. And it's like, I just appreciate what it did for the culture. And it's like, yeah, as much as I love the Avengers and Justice League, I do have other interests. Moviegoers have other interests and they want to see different types of films. So I'm hoping that the impact that these two movies leave from 2023 is gonna be invest in more dramas, invest in more
Yes.
rom-coms. And like, we had No Hard Feelings, the Jennifer Lawrence movie, come out, and that was a hit. People loved that, and people didn't necessarily go out in droves in the theaters to see it, but it was trending on Netflix for like 2 months. And it's like, I want us to invest in other types of genres and give them the same care and backing and confidence that Universal did with Oppenheimer, right? Like what we said earlier in the show, of they allowed Nolan to make a movie. There was no, oh, you don't have a budget because this is an awards movie. We're not going to market it. They released it in the summer. They released it in IMAX. They screwed Mission Impossible because it came out like a couple weeks after and took all the IMAX screens. And a drama, a thriller did that. It wasn't an Avengers movie that took Mission Impossible out of the IMAX screens. It was a period piece. And I hope that it changes the culture for the better. I know it won't, in the sense that like Mattel was already like, we're gonna make a Hot Wheels movie because people want movies about toys, and that was not the point. But
Correct.
we'll
Yeah.
see.
I like the fact that the serious topics were giving the time of day. on the zeitgeist soapbox. Even though, like you just mentioned with the Hot Wheels thing, a lot of the higher ups didn't really get off their high horse and listen to the guy on the soapbox talk about it. Like they thought that the message was, "Oh, this means more toy movies." Yes, we want the Mousetrap um, board game movie. We want the Candyland movie. That's what we want.
Give me
Um,
the Uno movie any day now, guys.
buddy, it's happening. Um,
No, but seriously, like
yeah.
I hope that Hollywood realizes we want something different.
Yes.
And that doesn't mean take the superhero movies away. Like, no, I'm excited for
No.
Superman Legacy just
But
for
they're
certain
not the
reasons.
only
But
things we want.
right, I don't need 20 of those. Give me
Yes.
4, and then give me 10 other things, and
Yeah.
that's how you're gonna have a healthy box office. I'm really interested to see what 2024 looks like because of the lack of superhero content. Marvel's only releasing 1 movie. Sony's releasing 3, so we only have 4 total.
What is Marvel releasing?
Deadpool,
Nice.
right? Deadpool 3, Madam Web, Craven the Hunter, and Venom 3. Those are the only superhero movies that come out. 3 of them are going to be bad for sure. But that means the rest of the year, Dune, I guess. It's going to be interesting to see how it plays out. And I think that's going to be good for audiences to get a break and see what they kind of gravitate to.
Yeah. I like the whole thing about cinema having a revive. Like also how nobody expected that Godzilla minus one will blow up the way it did.
Yeah.
You
A
know what I
movie with
mean? Like
subtitles.
yeah, stuff like that. I'm really happy that those things are happening. But no, yeah, Oppenheimer is it's a phenomenal movie. The soundtrack, bro.
Ooh,
What a subtle but engaging and powerful soundtrack. Um,
it's beautiful.
yes, yes, and the way it comes in and out from scenes, like I love that moments of dialogue. There's no music, and suddenly you have a little bit of music coming around it. You know, like it's just Ludwig Garrison is a magician.
Shout out to Sweden for Isaac Ludwig.
Yeah, I have a feeling that he's another one that's like he's in the same sphere as Michael Giacchino. Like they're bringing back the art of scoring movies. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like not now that, and we've talked about it in outside of outs off the record, right? We've
Right.
talked about how sometimes like it's felt like in the last couple of years we've kind of lost interest in scores. It's all been soundtracks, and the scores that are interesting are few and far between, or we don't talk about movie scores. Period. But we got people like Michael Giacchino, Hans Zimmer still, um, and now Louis Garrison um, doing scores like these, and it's something so unique,
It's
something so powerful and interesting, and so and it has an identity with the film.
yeah.
You know,
His previous work too, like is still phenomenal for what he's done before.
yeah,
He did Creed 2. Those are
The
some of my favorites.
Mandalorian.
Yeah, the both Black Panther movies. He works with Ryan
Didn't he?
Coogler a lot.
Didn't he do Joker?
I don't know. I know he
I
did
think
Turning
that's
Red, which is also very underrated Pixar score, by the way. Turning Red.
he did that.
uh, yeah. And of course Tenet, which Tenet is a fantastic score. An underrated one out of Nolan's movies for sure. Tenet's an underrated Nolan movie just in general, but that's another
Let me
conversation.
see. Who did the music? No, it wasn't her. It wasn't Louis Garrison. It was a young lady. It was I don't know her name, but I think she's from Sweden too. Yeah, it wasn't Ludwig. Um
Represent Sweden.
I think yeah. But yeah, it's I don't have the name her name right now, but yeah, it's Hildur Gudator. I
Yep.
can't pronounce her last name, but no, yeah, it was a lady. It wasn't Ludwig Garrison. But still, it's like like those are the kind of people that I want to see do more movies and do more scores because me love me a score.
I think you'd really like her score for Women Talking and Tar, if that's the case.
Ooh, I've been wanting to watch Tar. That
Yeah.
as a music man that I am, that movie looks very interesting. I think it's based on. Is it based on true events too?
I'm not sure. I actually haven't seen Tar yet, but I hear Kate
Yeah.
Blanchett's fantastic, of course.
Kate Blanchett is amazing.
um,
But no, yeah, this film, Oppenheimer's been great. It's great. I can't wait to watch it again. I mean, of course, whenever I watch it, I actually have to set a time because it is 3 hours of my life that I will not get back.
mhm.
Um, but it's, I would say it's well invested 3 hours.
Before we wrap up, I do want to just make a point. We've touched on it, but I just want to really hammer it home in the sense that I really appreciate that Nolan didn't show this bomb detonating in this movie, and the the artistic choice, because like it felt like it was gonna do it. Like when you just say what the movie's about, you feel like you're gonna see it. But like
When
I
you say
appreciate
detonate, are you talking about?
Hiroshima.
Okay, okay,
Yeah,
because
I'm glad.
he did do it, but he didn't do that. Right,
Right.
right. I agree with you because that's not
That
what the movie was about.
that's not what the movie that yeah,
Correct.
and we've touched on it a little bit, but it's like the movie never lost focus of the people, and that's
Right,
what the story was trying to
right,
convey of like the people that
right.
were behind this, not the thing itself, because that it's wasn't even 100 years ago. That's traumatizing for a lot of people, and so
Yes,
I appreciate the
it's been maybe what 70 years? No, 80 years, maybe
roughly.
75 years. Not that
Yeah,
long ago.
right.
But but he did villainize in a way
Mm,
the event, which I
yeah,
found very fascinating because not only in the troubles of the people concerned about the use of the gadget, but that whole moment with with President Truman,
hmm,
that when you see this foul dude, like because he was an asshole, you know, saying like the Hiroshima and Nagasaki wasn't about you. Nobody cares who made it. They only care about who dropped it. It's about me. Like I did this atrocity and being proud of it and being like disgusted and like the idea that those type of people exist, those type of people in
yeah,
power exist. And 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 the idea and the reason I don't know, I'm not in Christopher Nolan's head, but it makes me think that maybe the purpose of vilifying people like that, people in power, is because the science most of the scientific atrocities, most of the worst moments in our scientific history are because of the people that use science discovered by brilliant people, not by the brilliant people that actually discovered the science. You know what I mean?
yeah,
Men using discoveries to harm others. And that's the whole point of the argument of Oppenheimer too, is the fact that yes, we found out that the quantum world exists, quantum mechanics exists. We have the capacity of doing this. Should we do it? Should we keep doing it? There's going to be
yeah.
men like him that are going to.
And I'm glad that the film never lost sight of that.
Yeah,
Like you said, villainizing that type of mentality
yeah,
is something that I respect because again, when you are dealing with real world events, you've got to be careful on how you approach things or how you portray certain things. And I
it's a
think
real world
no
conversation that's still going on.
right. And I
Yeah,
think again, going all the way back to what we were saying about Murphy's performance of like not shying away from the bad that happened, but
yeah,
also you don't have to traumatize people by showing that again.
right, right, right. One thing is being dramatic for shock value. That's not
Mhm.
what he. That's not what this movie does.
Right.
Yeah, yeah. But also yeah, it's crazy, and I like Another thing about that scene, I don't know, I'm sorry, I keep going back to that scene, is how terrified he was about what was going on. When they asked him, what should we do with Los Alamos? He says, give it to the Indians. And Truman is just disgusted by the idea of giving stuff back to the people that they stole it from to begin with. Like this, again,
Right.
the fact that people, and anybody can come out and say, oh, that happened 7 years ago. There's no longer people like that. No, we're dealing with issues because of that mentality still. And the
Exactly.
fact that you're able to touch those issues in that very light way that conveys the message without being in an adulterate way, but without it being preachy, that's the brilliance of a great writer and a great communicator, that Chris is with these films.
For sure.
Tour de force.
Just to fact check, Emily Blunt was nominated for the Critics' Choice for Supporting Actress. She didn't win,
Nice.
but she was nominated.
Recognize. Hey, game recognizes game.
For sure.
Yeah.
I think that wraps this one up, though, right?
Yeah, man. We've done it. It didn't take 3 hours.
Take that, Nolan, the power of editing. No, I can't. But yeah, this is a fantastic movie.
Yes.
I really enjoyed it. I can't wait to see Nolan's next project.
Yes.
No Michael Caine for the first time in a long
True,
time.
but isn't he like retired officially from acting?
He announced his retirement in 2023, and I'm like, well, he could have filmed something. I don't know, but
Maybe he just didn't get that call.
Ooh, that'd be so rude.
I mean, he's been in every other movie. How is it rude?
I mean, if he retired, I get it. But if he didn't retire yet and he didn't call him, that's rude.
Well, there's people that retired and still got called. Supposedly retired.
That's also fair, you know? So back to my point.
Man.
That's rude.
You imagine he sees the announcement of Nolan saying, hey, I'm going to do this film, whatever. And then Michael Caine calls him and say, don't worry, mate. Don't call me.
I hope that's what happened, because if not,
there's a meme
Christopher Nolan needs to be calling him and be like, I'm sorry, I failed you.
Yeah, there's a meme somewhere of Christopher Nolan picking up the phone to call Michael Caine, and all you see is the scene from Batman, from The Dark Knight Rises, of him just going like this.
Cheers.
Yeah, like,
oh, classic.
Yes.
So if you enjoyed this, make sure you like and subscribe so you don't miss a thing here on the Chatter After YouTube channel. If you're listening on the podcast feed, make sure you give us a like. Make sure you leave us a review on Spotify, on Apple Podcasts. It helps us rank and search. That means more people can find the show. That means more people can be redirected to the YouTube channel. Because guess what? Things happen on the YouTube channel that don't appear in your podcast feed. Like the Chatter After Live happens Mondays, Wednesdays. Some of those episodes appear in your podcast feed. Not all of them. Like some of them are trailer reactions. You can't listen to that. You have to go to YouTube and watch those. So make sure you follow us platform of choice, whether that be podcast or YouTube. Also check out the Amateur Otaku. We're talking anime every single Thursday.
You guys are awesome. Thank you for joining us on this edition of the Shadow After. We have a lot more movies to talk about this year and a bunch of other projects that I know you'll be very interested in. And it'll be right for your enjoyment. So stay tuned on our channel, like and subscribe, click on the bell for notifications so you miss nothing. Till next time, guys, stay awesome and keep watching movies. Peace.